Hello everyone, a very good morning. This is Yamini Lakshmipati working for Fokites as an associate engineering manager. Currently working on redefining customer experience and also at some level trying to modernize our underlying infrastructure. I think at some point every startup would go through this phase where it would be most important for them to act on some of the long-standing customer feedback and also prep for some of the futuristic use cases in terms of scale by modernizing the infra. Pretty exciting, and it's been a year and a half for me with Four Kites, and prior to that, I was with Semantic, not in LifeLock right now. And I've had the opportunity to build some of the consumer facing internet security products, the likes of Norton Security Scan, Norton Security Studio, etc. That's a bit about myself, and I would also have Hitesh joining in for this session, specifically on the second half. And the way Hitesh and I would want to lay this talk out is in two parts. We wanted to talk a little bit about Four Kites, to share some insights of the Four Kites so we understand the business side of it. And B, delve into the specifics of the use case that we had explored internally with respect to Redis, share some of the performance metrics and the key takeaways post we finished that activity. So that's the overall gist of what we're trying to share today. And I think with that, let's just get started. Who are we? Essentially, a B2B startup primarily focusing on the predictive supply chain visibility side of things, right? So as we speak, we are tracking in over 55 plus countries, and while we look at the customer base, we have a very good focus on the North America, South America. We also have a decent customer base on the Europe, Africa, and slowly into the Asia Pacific and Australia regions too. All right, so predominantly our focus is to, sort of provide heightened visibility, heightened transparency when it comes to the supply chain ecosystem and see how we can optimize things and add customer value as we progress through this journey. Some of the likes of the customers, the Fortune 500 to 1000 that we sort of deal with on the right half of this line, predominantly, like we can sort of categorize them into the CPG, retail, manufacturing, chemicals side of, yeah, food and beverage side of things. All right. Now, a little bit as to, of course, like we all understand that the supply chain network is going to be complex, and it's a huge trillion dollar industry, right? So there are going to be a lot of moving parts here. And we do have like different verticals focusing on specifics as we progress through this chain, right? So if we look at the current landscape, right, so we do have a proliferation of a large number of systems. Of course, yes, they are adding value. But the point that I'm trying to make here is they operate in silos, right? So we have the transportation management system, we have yard management system, we have warehouse management systems, and so on and so forth, right? So but the point is, there is no universal enterprise resource planning kind of a system. And the kind of data points that the system generate, right? So essentially, this is big data, and we need to have that kind of an architecture to scale and be able to understand and derive analytics out of the data, right? So that's that, and and some portion of it is predominantly on the traditional side of the things as well, right? Like the EDI side of infra, and there isn't much on the data sanitization side of things as well. So the point that I'm trying to convey through this infographic is that we cannot equate a digital supply chain to a digitized supply chain, right? So uh, of course, yes, like there are a lot of systems, there are a lot of data points, but then how are we able to transform the entire chain? How do we add more intelligence to the chain? How do we understand there are a lot of moving parts here, and there is a scope for like someone to understand, or like the most important thing is to surface up all the problem statements, A, and then B, to like sort of see how we can optimize that. Because across all of these verticals, there's dollar and movement, right? Like, so all the operational inefficiencies, if we can like sort of identify and work on them, and like sort of optimize them, we are going to save, definitely, we're going to definitely save. But then the other most important goal will be the customer value, right? So at any point in time, if we can keep our customers happy, if we can delight them, I think there isn't anything like that, right? So if a customer is, say for example, if they're looking for something in a store, and if that product is not available, or if it's out of stock, that's not an ideal situation that any business would want to be in, right? Like, and that's exactly where Fokites is pitching in as well. So that's exactly where Fokites fits in as well, right? So that's where, like, we are trying to provide the real time visibility so that our customers can make use of that, and make sure that their customers are feeling happy about how they are dealing with them, all the while making sure that we Forekites is helping our customers identify all the operational inefficiencies in their chain, and then be able to sort of save dollars when it comes to the cost side of it, right? Like, so that's a digital supply chain, right? Like, and just not me, right? Like, Gartner's report in the month of February 2020, right? Like, they did claim that majority of the supply chain leaders do look for real-time visibility as the first thing, right? So it's pretty important, and it requires a lot of things as well, right? Like, so this infographic sort of just talks about the different aspects of it, right? Like, we need to have the right set of data. When I say the right set of data, there's going to be like different data points, and like you said, right, like the core offering of us would be helping our customers with our own predicted arrival times for the shipment, the known arrival times for the shipment, right? Like, so what do I mean by that is, there could be a lot of real time factors that we may have to consider, right? So it's just not 2 points, and then it's just not like some random timestamp saying that, hey, your shipment is going to be like at this facility uh, by let's say like from 2 hours from now, and so on and so forth, right? Like, so there is going to be a lot of real timeness here. What do I mean by that? There can be weather problems, there can be construction issues, there can be the business hours of the delivery facility, the distribution facility, it could be closed. We do have to have the hours of service applied, because end of the day our drivers are human beings, and they would have to rest, right? So all of such real time factors do play a critical role, and with top that, with the fact that we also have an edge in terms of the historic data, right? Like, with that, we are able to improve the accuracies of the known arrival times that we generate as well. So it is with this that, like the different sectors in the vertical that I spoke about earlier, right? Like, it could be the track and trace, or it could be the yard and dog professionals, that they are able to proactively understand a lot more about their shipments, and be able to take corrective actions, right? So if I'd have to like sort of put it this way, right? Like, so from being reactive to proactive to predictive to prescriptive, right? Like, so that's how we are looking at our journey, that's what we're looking at for Kite's journey. Yeah. And the second piece of it is the network strength, right? Like, so what I mean by that is, for Kites, imagine it's like a visibility aggregator provider who's sitting at the top, right? Like, so I'm going to have like sort of multiple networks below me. I know, like A, B, C, D, there are multiple supply chain networks across, and hence there's an opportunity for Kites, to say, or to be able to act as a platform where the multiple customers can collaborate amongst each other, right? So it did help them, actually it does help them, right? So it, in a way, because they might not know that customer B and C is actually shipping to A, and if we can like sort of make this collaboration happen, right? Like, so that's more visibility for them, that's more transparency for them, and the more we do all that, the better it is for them, because they're going to get things ready. So like I said, right, like the track and trace, the procurement side of the users, or the docking yard side of users, every sector, or every group will definitely would love to like keep the rest of the stakeholders informed, right? Like, and that's where the network effects kicks in as well, right? And the other pieces here, right, like it just sort of talks about the world class operation. So what do I mean by that? We need to have we have our own proprietary network of ELD providers, right? So we need to be able to do different kind of integrations. We need to be able to talk to different kinds of systems and be able to get all these data points, and then apply our intelligence on top of that. And adding to that is the different sectors or the different professionals that we have to be like sort of providing visibility to providing intelligence to at different points in time. You start from a point where you understand, hey, where is my truck? What is the time at which am I going to receive the goods? From there to being in a position and saying that, hey, there are going to be a bunch of shipments today that are going to be delayed. You can do A, B, C things to make sure that that does not happen, and that's being prescriptive, right? So that's huge, and I think that's exactly the value add that ForKites as a visibility, real-time visibility provider with predictive analytics can sort of add to our customers. So just to sort of complement what I said right now, this infographic pretty much sort of summarizes the different aspects of ForKites, the different problems, the business problems, the value being generated, what is the actual impact that's being needed, right? So the innermost circle naturally, yes, are shippers, our customers, right? Like the shippers would want to move shipments from different points, and the third party logistics firms who will be managing a bulk of shippers. Uh, and the next circle, like just sort of talks about the different offerings that are built on a base offering, right? Like, so what do I mean by that? The base offering would be the primary tracking or the primary real time predictive known arrival time of all the shipments, right? So being able to identify that, being able to surface that information will be our primary role, will be our primary responsibility. And the other interesting things on top of that, like could be in addition to doing that, we can always do temperature tracking. We can actually integrate with multiple systems and be able to see that, hey, your goods were maintained at X Fahrenheit, like at this point in time, and it did cross, like it did violate the threshold that you would want it to. And these are, clear win-wins, clear data points that are actually required by our customers at different points in time, because it could be really sensitive, right? Like the goods that they are shipping, and it would make a lot of sense as well. And when it comes to of course, the inside side of it is the huge reporting, the prescriptive stuff that we were able to make is definitely very, very key for our customers, right? And on the lane optimization or the yard optimization side of it, inventory reduction side of it, right? Like, so those are a couple of interesting pieces. Since we also understand how shipments are moving, on which specific lanes things are moving, we're able to optimize on that aspect as well. And definitely, like there could be backhauls, and we are in a position to, like sort of make those customers collaborate, and then, like make the whole situation win-win, because there's a carrier involved, and there's going to be an backhaul, of course, naturally, if it's an empty backhaul, and if you're able to, like just sort of leverage all the data points that we have and make these people collaborate, and then leverage the empty movement, right? Like just by making sure that we are connecting it with another customer, then that's the value add, right? Like, so that's the scope of the optimization, and those are the different areas, or those are the different problems that anyone can solve from this real-time visibility standpoint, right? Like, so the point that I'm trying to make here, or the reason I am highlighting all of this, is because I myself was like kind of trying to understand a lot about the areas, right? Like, what can I solve, what is so complex about it, and what are the different problems that I can solve, where is the scope for optimization, and all of that. Anyone who sees this from outside might think, like there isn't much complexity here, and we may not actually know on how things map out, or like get hashed out eventually on the technical side of it. But the more we keep looking at it, the better it is, and the better cohesive it is for us to map out the business requirements with the tech side of it, right? And that's a key thing here, and that's in fact the interesting piece in the overall puzzle, I would say. Of course, yes, the final circle, like just sort of presents the entire gamut of modes that we can cover, right? Like, so TL, LTL, truckload, less than truckload, parcel, rail, ocean, and of course, recently we are working on air as well. So predominantly, if you look at it from the value standpoint, it's going to be either cost across different sectors, it's definitely cost, like at some level, reducing all the operational inefficiencies, like I said before, and then being able to save on that front, being a point. And the most other important takeaway or point would be the customer value, would be the delight, like I said before. So, yep, of course, yes, the freight security too is becoming an important piece. You know, that naturally depends on the sensitivity of the goods being carried, and we do make a difference on that aspect as well, right? So yeah, that's pretty much a little bit of four kites, and primarily the reason why I wanted to spend a few minutes on that front is because I thought, like it would help the audience connect the business and the tech side of it, and then like things would come together nicely, just to make the whole thing cohesive. So that's the intention or motivation behind it. And if there are any questions or feedbacks, we're more than happy to take it here. All right, cool. Now that being said, let's just pause a bit on the slide. Very high level architecture of the entire Fokites, and I would specifically want to focus on the Redis cache piece here, right? Like, so naturally there are going to be multiple microservices. Of course, yes. We don't want to offload. I mean, we don't want it to like sort of overload our database, and we would have to leverage Redis. So, but that being the very simple or straightforward use case that I would say, and of course, yes, Hitesh is going to speak a lot about the uh, specific problem and the specific things that we tried on this front, right? There are other definite use cases as well here, right? So not just that, right? So, and of course, like I said, this is just a subset of the multitude of other use cases where Redis is being actively used, right? The reason why, again, I would wanted to talk a bit about this is because there could be someone in the audience who can actually connect their business problem with what we are stating here, and then be able to like think of Redis as one potential a way to effectively solve it. So that's exactly where I come from. All right. So, yep. Having said that, notifications, right? So a little bit of context on this, right? Like, so there will be tens of thousands of different notification rules that our customers would want to configure on our platform. And yes, we are using Redis to like sort of build this. I would not say the entire functionality, but then like few pieces where we wanted things to be like really effective. We are using Redis there, and definitely yes, we have a lot of scope for us to improve on that aspect. And about the shipment lifecycle transitions, right? Like very similar to a process or a thread. Definitely, yes. Shipments and loads in our platforms will have their own lifecycle, and any dynamic parameter that we would not want to persist, but we would want it to like sort of have real quick, effective access, easy access, right? Like, so we do leverage Redis for that. And yes, for a couple of internal core services, we do use Redis to throttle as well, right? Like, that's interesting. And the fifth bullet being the real-time tracking. Like I said, we being the real-time visibility provider, tracking is extremely important for us. You know what, we do 5 minute and 15 minutes tracking today. Not just that, but then like with multiple other integrations, we will be doing different modes of tracking too. But then the point that I would want to make here is, at some level, we leverage Redis to like do this 5 and 15 minute cycle of tracking, right? So this in itself actually deserves a talk, deserves a session on its own. So I don't want to go deep into this, but then I still would wanted to call it out here that it gives us an ability to make sure that our architecture is like sort of reliable, right? So that's the point that I wanted to make here. And yes, like I said, we will be having to have multiple integrations, and we will be having to talk to different ELDs, different electronic logging devices, and there could be a lot of parameters. There are in fact a lot of parameters around it, that where we are using Redis to like sort of either index those locations or indicate the failures, and then be able to have effective access to all of these data points as we need, right? Oh, yes, and the seventh bullet is about the pipelining of some of the transactions, right? Like, of course, yes, we do use pipeline transactions, and while we have shipments being created, we may have to have access to the lot of customer specific data points that come in, like during the shipment creation. So we do use Redis for that, is the point that we wanted to mention there. And this is just, like I said, a subset, and the intention is to see if anyone can like sort of resonate with any of these, to see if they can map it out with their business use cases with the specific tech stuff that we are discussing today. All right. On that note, I think it's time for me to hand this over to Hitesh. He's going to specifically walk us through the problem that we've had while you leveraging, well, I would say actively leveraging Redis for a lot of use cases, and on the different things that we tried out there, and the different performance metric that we were trying to derive and look at, and yes, and essentially how things unfolded. So Hitesh should be covering that aspect for all of us. Over to Hitesh. Thank you.
Thanks, Yamini. So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Hitesh Sarangal. I'm working with 4Kites as a position of software development engineer for the past 1 year. And talking a bit more about myself, uh, I like participating in online coding competitions and hackathons as well. I was fortunate enough to be a participant of ACM International Collegiate of Programming Contest, also known as ICPC 2019 regionals. And getting back to the presentation, as Yamini have already explained about different Redis use case and what 4Kites is and what 4Kites do, and how Redis fits into the 4Kites architecture and all those stuff. Now we'll dive deep into the implementation part. So let's get started. So before we start with the implementation, so let's look at the problem statement first. So what was the motivation behind building some stuff on top of Redis? So the basic and the fundamental problem that we at 4Kites are facing is we're having a single Redis cluster that is used across the board. So there were multiple teams that were using this cluster. So what if this cluster goes down or it is not able to handle those requests? Then definitely there are potential risks behind that. Keeping all those things in mind, we want this cluster to be as safe as possible. But what we realized in the recent days, as we are evolving and as we are growing as a company, the memory consumption was gradually increasing. So there were potential chances of running out of space, which will definitely lead to the downgrade performance as well. Now I'd like to highlight this fourth point, feeble memory during snapshots. So if we look at a graph, this graph denotes feeble memory inside Redis. Feeble memory is nothing but the amount of free memory that is available on the host, and we see a pattern in this graph where we have a dip of around 10 to 15 GBs that is happening periodically every day. This dip is nothing but the snapshotting, the time at which the snapshot is going on within the Redis. Snapshot is nothing but a backup of the data that happens periodically as a background process. But in addition to that, there are some performance impact of taking these snapshots as well. So first of all, we may encounter increased latencies for that specific period of time on that specific node. So what happens internally during snapshotting? So Redis process forks itself and the parent process starts serving the request while the child node saves data onto the disk. So this is a kind of background process that actually happens and take backups periodically on the Redis host. But how this forking or snapshotting will affect? It will gradually increase the memory usage during snapshot generation. So when this memory usage exceeds the total memory that is present inside the Redis host, internally swapping will get triggered, which will further increase the swap usage and it will further slow down the nodes as well. This swap usage will definitely downgrade the performance because now the data that we are getting, we are getting that data from the disk instead of in-memory cache. But if the swap usage further increases the threshold, then internally LRU eviction will get triggered and a failover might also happen. And it is also recommended that this swap usage should not exceed 50 MBs. So this is all the thing that we don't want in production. So we at 4Kites are heavily relying on Redis, and failover like this might disrupt our system for a few seconds to minutes as well. So we thought of instead of adding more and more cluster to our existing resources, so what if we optimize the way we store the data into the Redis? So that was the basic motivation behind building stuff on top of it. So how we did that? Let's get started on that. Okay, so what did we do? what are the various different phases that we have to go through and how we achieve that. So we'll discuss that now. So first of all, we have this third-party tool called RMA. That stands for Redis Memory Analyzer tool. So the input to this tool will be a parameter that will actually tell us on how many keys it has to run the scan. So we did this analysis on 1 million key dataset. So RMA gave us an output where with respect to each key, it told how many bytes it occupied in that cluster on that subset, and what is the total frequency and the total count of that key inside that. Based on that output, we were able to identify the potential contributors. We applied some of the best compression decompression algorithms on those contributors. At that time, there were a lot of algorithms available in the market like zlib, zstandard, snappy, broadly, and LZ4 also. But on the basis of decompression ratio, compression and decompression speed, these are the three different criteria that we chosen for our algorithm, and we found that LZ4 and Snappy are more favorable for our use case based on these evaluation criteria. Now, this LZ4 and Snappy algorithm, both of them have already been benchmarked and established. And what we saw in that case in Redis, so Redis common operations are Redis set operation, that is pushing value to the Redis, and Redis get operation, that is fetching value from the Redis. So again, that analysis was for three different scenarios: no compression, Snappy, and then LZ4. In case of set operation, LZ4 Snappy was way better than no compression, but it was almost equal to the LZ4. But in case of get operation, LZ4 left behind Snappy. Also, we noticed for some of the use cases, LZ4 was twice as faster than Snappy in case of decompressions. So we choose LZ4 to be our primary algorithm for our use case. So let's give a quick code walkthrough. Since most of the microservices at FourKites are in Ruby on Rails, and some of them are in Golang as well, but we thought of implementing this in Ruby. So in Ruby, we have this LZ4 Ruby gem available in the official documentation. So one can easily pull from their official website, that is rubygems.org, and start working on that. And we also have this wrapper built on top of Redis. So the motivation behind building this wrapper was to have a single concern and responsibility. So this wrapper serves most of the use cases, like it prevents running performance intensive queries in production. So some of the queries like key stars that will actually list all the keys that we have in the production. Currently we have around 256 million keys in Redis cluster. So running those performance intensive queries on production will highly impact our system. So this wrapper takes care of preventing those. The second thing is the migration of keys. If we want to migrate some of the subset of keys or some namespaces to be migrated from one cluster to another, then doing that using this wrapper was pretty easy and a fairly small change for us. Now I would like to share some of the performance results as well. Now, since we have a lot of metrics that we have considered, but I would like to filter some of the important ones, like the memory, how much memory we were able to save, what were the CPU utilizations that it took to compress and decompress those values, and what were the total network bytes that were transferred over the network. So I'll dive deep into each of them. So elastic cache memory usage. So in that we have two different scenarios. So on the left we see with compression, on the right we have without compression. With compression means LZ4 was running in the background. Without compression, there is no normal, that is the normal way of storing data into the Redis. So again we see two different lines, that is orange and blue line. Orange stands for bytes used for cache, and blue is for freeable memory. Again, as I already told, freeable memory is nothing but the amount of free memory that is available on the host, and bytes used for cache is the total bytes that is occupied by the Redis. Now if we add these two memories, that is a total memory that Redis can use. That is bytes used for cache plus freeable memory is equal to total bytes that the Redis can use. So we did this analysis on around 40 to 50,000 keys. So we started from a baseline of 150 MB with LZ4 running in the background. It it went beyond 450 MBs. The total difference evaluated was 314 MB. Again, we started from the same baseline, that is 150 MB. In case of orange line, it went up beyond 700 MB. So difference was evaluated as 583 MB. So similarly, the vice versa case. For blue line, we started beyond 700 MB, and the freeable memory went down around 350 MB with LZ4. Again, the difference was exactly same, that is 314 MB. For blue line without compression, it's again started from the same baseline 700 MB, and it went beyond the baseline. So again, the difference was around 583 MB. So in both the cases, we can see the amount of memory that we were able to save was around 46% of memory that we were able to save. Since this dataset is for only 50,000 keys, but 4Kites is a platform where we deal with millions of keys on a daily basis. So with respect to that, we save a lot of memory for our case. Elastic Cache CPU usage. In terms of CPU, we don't see much of the impact. In terms of get operations, yes, we see a slight increase with compression, that is 0.5 increase with get operation. When LZ4 was running, it took 6.4% of the CPU to decompress those values, but without compression, it was 5.9% of the CPU. So in terms of set, this is negotiable, but in terms of get operations, that is where we have more frequent operations in our case. So we see a slight increase of 0.5%, but I think that is negotiable because on the previous slide, as we saw, we were also saving 46% of memory as well. And this action was performed under a throughput of around 3000 requests per minute. So Elastic Cache network bytes out. Of course, we are applying the compression logic and decompression logic. So the network bytes that will be transferred over the network will also be less. So in case of set operation, we don't see much difference between the bytes that were transferred. But in terms of get operation, while decompressing the value, yes, there was a big difference between them. For with compression, it was 45 MBs, but without it took 67 MB. Again, a 33 to 34% drop of network bytes. So these are the three performance metrics that we have considered, and we found we were able to save a lot of memory using these scenarios, using only the compression and decompression logic. So thanks from my side. I'd like to hand over to Yamini now.
Thank you, Hitesh. Now, just to summarize the whole thing, right? So, in terms of key takeaways, the main points that we wanted to highlight are as follows, right? So, we were able to reduce the memory consumed. What I mean by that is the bytes used for cache metric, the 46%, which is really good. And in terms of the cost projection, right, like there are two parts to it. One, someone can consider, like downgrading their cluster because they don't have a need to, sort of have additional memory always available, right? Like, so that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is to understand that we're able to take more load, and that essentially depends upon the business as well, right? Like, so it all depends on that. Well, we do when we looked at the cost side of it, we were able to derive that approximately around $7,000 per year is something that we might be saving in future, maybe because we will not vertically upscale the cluster, or if we consider downsizing it. So those are the two ways to look at that piece. And of course, yes, network bandwidth being reduced by 33%, which is good enough. Beyond that, I also wanted to highlight a couple of other things, right? Like, so we've been specifically interested on the probabilistic data structures side of it, especially Bloom filters, to see if we can narrow down our search space effectively. So that's one. And the other interesting thing is the sorted sets and Redis, right? So we've been trying to actively explore to see if we can apply that to our business problems and efficiently solve some of those technically. Cool. So those are the major key takeaways. And on that note, I'd like to thank each of you for listening to our session. And I'd really wanted to appreciate the organizers and the committee, like for this opportunity. And I'm sure, we always look up to this community, and we learned a lot from this community, and we are more than happy to, share our learnings and the different things that we are trying, and then, share it back with this community. That's pretty exciting. And on that note, thank you to all of you once again. Stay tuned. Thanks a lot. Bye.